So my name is Gwen Garcelon. I have been a sustainability consultant for about 15 years now, but sustainability is now an outdated concept and term. If we assumed we could somehow find ways to sustain the level of consumption and natural resource use that we have become familiar with, we now know we need the resources of 5 planet Earth. So we're in a new ballgame now. And that's why we are experiencing over allocation of the Colorado River and the Crystal River. That is our town's water source. So a big part of my work now is coaching and therapy around eco grief. Also host retreats for anyone who would like to reclaim a reciprocal relationship with the planet. This is called regeneration. Regenerative ranching doesn't degrade soil or water that it uses. Regenerative agriculture gives back to the land as much or more than it takes. Regenerative designed buildings actively restore and improve the surrounding environment and ecosystems rather than just minimizing negative impacts. So we're a long way from this, as we know, but this whole way of relating to the land and water is what will be needed for any viable future scenario, locally and globally. So the original report that I did an update on was done in 2018, and it was called the Vulnerability, Consequences, and Adaptation Planning Scenarios. But it's really about drought resiliency. And it was facilitated by the Western Water Assessment based in Boulder and Salt Lake City. And so 2018, as you will remember, was a very hot year. We had the Lake Christine fire. It was a huge wake-up call for us locally and globally. It was when the International Panel on Climate Change released their special report that said that emissions must be halved by 2030 compared with 2010 levels to have a good chance of limiting temperature rise to 1.5 Celsius, as outlined in the Paris Agreement. We've now experienced in 2024 a full year where global average temps were over 1.5 Celsius. So we're blowing through that, and we're in uncharted territory. The town of Carbondale is one of the pilot towns that went through this 2-day workshop around drought resiliency and came up with an extensive list of recommendations. It's a really solid process, great stakeholder group. I came across the report when I was researching a mechanism for the town to support and drive adaptive climate action back in 2022. Adaptation is really the next frontier of climate action. So the difference between climate mitigation and adaptation. Most municipal and county climate action plans focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This is called decarbonization. Clear, clean energy for the economy, forget the whole acronym, is paid by the town of Carbondale to oversee the town's climate action plan, which focuses on decarbonization efforts. Towns and counties are just beginning to take on adaptive planning. You may have heard of something called the transition town movement. And this is about transitioning communities to be able to function in a post-carbon world. So post a lot of fossil fuel use that we're currently in the middle of. And almost across the board, these transition efforts, these adaptive efforts focus on things like local food system development and community cohesion and connection. this drought resiliency work and awareness is about adaptation. How will we function with less water? How to get out in front of that? And what should we be doing with the water we have to increase resilience in our town? Okay, so a big part of the first process was looking at some climate trends. And so these are things like 4 to 6 degrees hotter by 2050, which again is only 25 years away. And with the self-reinforcing feedback loop, like methane release, and many of the things that are predicted and are happening because of that 1.5 degree plus Celsius temperature rise, this kind of warming is likely to happen faster. So probably before 2050. So that, what will that look like? What are our hottest days now? The low 90s, sometimes we see high 90s. That will be more typical as our baseline. Also 20 to 30% stream flow reduction. What will our rivers look like when that's the case? That's something we really need to start planning for, those kinds of scenarios, because we don't have a ton of time to get out in front of this. So we can expect that, when the peaks melt off earlier and faster, our ecosystems don't have a chance to absorb that water fully because it's coming down much faster. So creating drier vegetation and soil, higher risk of the fires that we're starting to see. So the purpose of this update that I did was to reassess the 2018 priorities amid these worsening climate trends, identify progress and gaps in adaptation planning, recommend actions to improve drought and wildfire resilience, and research other regional community initiatives. And I even talked to folks in Wyoming and Utah about what kind of positions we're starting to see to do this kind of adaptive climate action planning. So the progress thus far is that our water utilities are in fairly good shape. We have enough water treatment ability and backup generators and ability to pull water from both the Roaring Fork and the Crystal. So that is in good shape. What we need to get out in front of more is the actual health of the river and the ecosystem work that will help to keep that flowing. Our parks are doing some good scenario planning for drought scenarios, and our environmental board has initiated something called the Turf Buyback Program. So this is something to encourage beneficial water use. So instead of all the grass that's being watered, we could be using less water to water pollinator gardens, which we're really going to need those pollinators if we're going to have any kind of a functioning local food system. So these are the kinds of things that people can take advantage of right now. There's the Turf Buyback Program allows for, we'll pay you $2 per square foot of yard that you transition. And I want to invite Eric Friendlinger up to talk about some of what's going on in the parks So we know what to expect. And we can not be surprised. And also know, and feel confident about what our townsfolk are taking care of. So please come up, and I wanted him to talk about parks.
Yeah, so Gwen asked me to kind of do an assessment of our park space, our acreage that we irrigate and kind of how we irrigate it. And so, because that's going to matter in a drought scenario picture. And so we did put together, kind of a spreadsheet that really looked at our parks in a couple different ways. Not only their utilization, and that's what this is right here. Is it an active park? Is it a passive park? Is it a park that has a municipal function? Is it a decorative park, not really used for other things than just pretty space? Is it open space where it's not irrigated by us, irrigated naturally? Is it a park that's used for a special event? So we started to break down all these parks, and we also had privately maintained public parks, like in River Valley Ranch. So those are also parks in our park system. And then we broke it down into kind of what's the park used for? What's its main use, or is it a multi-use park? So you can see this is kind of what we broke down. I know it's too small to see, but so this is just all of our different uses of our park spaces, and you can see how one park, like in any park, has many different uses, and some are just specific to something else. It doesn't have as many uses.
Eric,
as
can we
park.
put this on this table on the town website?
Yeah.
So people can access it.
Oh,
I think
you
that
bet.
would be.
You bet, yeah. And then we broke them down into like, what is their, kind of color coded sports field is the orange one, special event field is the green one. Community gardens, right? That's gonna matter in a drought scenario. That's people are growing food and we take away their water, they're not growing food. So, and then we have the privately maintained public parks. That's how they're kind of laid out here. And what came from this was really a look at the acreage that we are irrigating with domestic water, but also the acreage that we're irrigating with ditch water, and took a really good look. So we're irrigating 67% of these parks utilizing ditch water. Some of them have a dual system where we can go domestic or ditch. And so that gives us a little bit more resiliency when we have that type of option for a park. But a lot of that water is not domestic treated water that we're irrigating our parks with. So that's important, right? If the Crystal River dips down and our Carbondale ditch and our Weaver ditch are non-functional, that means a lot of these parks that have these special events, sports fields, community gardens aren't going to be getting water out of that system, and we're going to have to rely back on our domestic system on some of those uses. And so it's going to put a big strain on our domestic system that we don't even realize now until that happens, right? I mean, that's the scary part. If it's that bad of a drought, then that 67% of our parkland space is being irrigated by a ditch. That's a lot of water. Our domestic system is probably not going to be able to handle that. And so then we're in a scenario of looking at these parks and saying, what do we save? What do we let go? Right. And so we need to be thinking ahead for that type of decision. We need that to be a communal decision. I don't want that to be my decision, right? I want that to be a committee's decision that really looks at this type of data and says, well, let's try to save this park. Let's try to save this park. And a lot of those are sports fields. We got to have safe soccer fields for kids to play on, right? If that's a deadpan heart because we have no water, that's not good. That's not me doing my job. So this was a great exercise to kind of get us to that next step of saying, okay, if we had to decide, at least we have some data, and we can decide kind of what to do with that. The other thing I just want to mention is kind of our efforts as a Parks and Recreation department on drought resiliency. And so we do have the ability to kind of see what's going on with the drought and the length of the drought's potential, how it's going to affect us. And so we're able to hopefully get ahead of some of that and start to dial down our percentages of watering in our parks. And we have the ability to get in and go, okay, let's take it down to 80%. We're operating at 80% right now in all of our park irrigation systems right now, just because we're in a drought. And so we have to watch the parks and see how they go and keep them safe, obviously, and keep them functional and keep the vegetables growing. But we are operating at 80% now. We also look at our mow heights too. That's our other kind of ability to help with this drought resiliency, is to raise some of our heights of our grass. And so mow it a little bit longer, mow it less, and let that not create a heat island effect. Let that shade actually cool that down and retain moisture. You can't do that with a golf course, though. Obviously, you can't let your putting green go.
We
long.
actually did that in common areas in RVR. We
Okay,
worked
great.
really hard to try and grow the grass longer so that it would need less water.
Yep. And just to have, we also follow an integrated weed management plan, which really, looks at how to treat our public lands, without the use of chemicals to control weeds and actually to, enhance that soil health through a lot of our techniques of aeration, fertilization, and overseed of most of our parks. So back in 2018, I think it was, we did some of these techniques. We raised our mow heights. We made sure the grass was long, some of our parks, and we started to try to, really figure out which parks we're going to irrigate and which parks we're not going to irrigate. Luckily, we didn't get that far, but we were thinking about it, and we need to be thinking about it now. But because of the health of that soil, those parks, that created resiliency in those parks. And even though we got down to about 75% watering there, maybe even lower, of all of our parks, they didn't brown out, they didn't get dead pan, they didn't get hard. Our technique showed us that we're creating resiliency in our parks with our integrated weed management plan technique. So that was good too, and good to just know that it can work and have some more resiliency just built into what we're already doing. So it's really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important strategy that we need to start looking at, not just on our town lands, but everywhere. And be doing more public education for residential use. So people understand that if they're using integrated weed management, then and their soil is healthier, they won't have to use as much water, and it'll be healthier for the pollinators, like all the things. It's such a holistic way of looking at, again, how we're stewarding our land, and it's becoming more and more necessary to do that.
And we have to do a better job of sharing that information, that knowledge with the public too, and so, we have to do the work first, so we have something to share. But we're getting to a point, since 2018 when we, created the integrated weed management plan, where we actually have some pretty good data on how it's working, and have some successful data too on how it's working, which is always when you want to share it. And you should want to share when it's not successful too, so you can learn from it. But we are, I see this update to this plan as an opportunity to re-engage the public and let them know what we're doing and what they can do too. So it's a good opportunity.
Eric, I wanted to ask you where there are demonstration pollinator gardens, either existing or planned.
Yeah, so in Silvers Park, is all those little gardens on the west side of the park have been adopted by the pollinator group, and so those are good demonstration gardens, and there's signage there kind of explaining what they are doing.
Great.
At Thompson Park, Sue Gray is working on a good one at Thompson Park, where our permaculture garden is out there. So she's working on a good pollinator garden.
Where Thompson House. is,
Thompson House.
so anybody can go and look at that.
Yeah, and then our, you know, I mean, our public garden parks, you know, that are, you know, those are actually great pollinators, you know, pollinator gardens in and of themselves. So, so Demeter's garden right here behind us is doing really well. And Hendrick's garden is also doing really well. They're doing a great job. They're growing a lot of food. Take a walk through those gardens. It's pretty impressive what they're growing there. So.
So that's definitely something we need to be looking at, is places for more community gardens and more support systems for those gardens. Thank you.
Oh, you bet.
So much.
You bet.
Great. Okay, more progress is, I talked to someone in the planning department, and there's definitely awareness of the need to evolve the building and landscape code to not only require drought resilient plants and trees, but to follow the fire mitigation standards that we now know are becoming so very important to the safety of our town. It doesn't make any sense for people to be, you know, spending all the money to create landscaping that they're gonna have to get rid of if they want a safe home. So Rob's gonna talk more about that. So yeah, Rob, why don't you come on up and talk about the fire mitigation piece. One thing that's probably one of the most, and I think Rob will agree, is one of the most important things that's happened since 2018 in terms of drought resilience and awareness is the formation of the Roaring Fork Valley Wildfire Collaborative, which has been formed and is at work on almost, you know, all of the fire mitigation recommendations that were made in the original report. So I'm going to
talk about that stuff a little bit before we go through the slides.
okay,
Just, you know,
great, yeah, come on up.
my name's Rob Goodwin. I'm the fire chief at, Carbondale and Rural Fire Protection District. Mayor.
Okay.
Just a little, just so you know what we do, just a little bit. The Carbondale and Rural Fire Protection District is a special district, like a school district, right? It's not, we're not a department of the town of Carbondale, although we protect the town of Carbondale. And so the fire district is about 300 square miles. It goes over the top of the Clear Pass a little bit, including the town of Marble, down the Crystal Valley, Redstone, Carbondale, and then goes east on 82, just up to Elkabell, just about the Eagle County line, and then at Missouri Heights, including Spring Valley all the way towards Red Canyon, and then to the west, you know where FedEx is on 82, so it cuts off about there. That's the Glenwood Springs Fire District. So it's a big place, a lot of public land. We have 5 fire stations, Marble, Redstone, Carbondale, one on Missouri Heights, and then one between Carbondale and Glenwood Springs, right at the CMC turnoff. You know where that is, right? Instead of turning right, turn left. There was a mobile home park back in there, called Cavern Springs now. It used to be the H-Lazy. We built a station in there as well. And we're a combination fire department. We have a combination of career and volunteers. I started as a volunteer a long time ago, 1987, when I was young. And so I've been with them a long time. So we have some career and volunteer. We have 2 stations that are staffed 24/7 with responders. The Carbondale station and the one to the west by the CMC turnoff. And when I say staff, we have 4 responders on duty in Carbondale and 2 there. So we got 6 responders covered by and a combination of volunteers. We have other staff like me. I'm not on shift. I'm the chief and I do stuff, but I'm still going on. But so we have about 30 paid people and about 35 volunteers. So that's kind of how we roll. And we do everything. We do fire response, swiftwater rescues, high angle rescues, wildfire, and we have 4 paramedic ambulances as well. So we do all the ambulance transport. And this year we'll run about 2,000 calls for service. So that's where we are.
Beginning of the presentation.
Yeah. So one thing that Glenn talked about for 2018, that was such a big year. And you know, kind of culminating with the Lake Christine fire, and that was a wicked few days. I was the operations chief on that fire, meaning I ran firefighting operations till the federal team came in. And that's kind of what happens around here. When in the West, when a fire happens and it's what we call an expanding incident, man, it's going nuts, it's going wild and all that. All the locals, we all just show up. We went to help assault and everybody came, and you order everything you can. And we had stuff coming that night from Aurora and Evergreen, everywhere. And so we managed that fire for the first 40 straight hours until the Type 1 team came in. So, and the biggest thing is mitigation and evacuation. We evacuated 2,300 buildings on July 4th that day as it was roaring into assault. And we had a whole Type 1 team came in, we briefed them and all that. And we thought, okay, we'll put everything to bed for the night, engines doing structural protection, rest all these people, and start again in the morning. At about 10 o'clock that night, had a microburst above the salt, and that fire turned around and went west, down. And I remember walking out of the Willett station, looking up, and there were 200-foot flames up above, what is it, Ace Lane place there, just west, east of the Belgian Valley. And they were rocking and rolling, and we didn't evacuate that trailer park. I think the fire that was burning the other one. So we immediately did evacuation, and then we sent in engines and people into that trailer park, trying to get people out and to see if we could do a defense or what, or if we needed to bed. And it was terrifying. And what we ended up doing was what's called a burnout. And I don't know if you've seen the photos of that fire, but there's the aerial photos show it's all black and there's one straight line right next to that trailer park. And it worked, and we didn't kill anyone, and everybody got out. That's how weird and unpredictable wildfires can be. So yeah, mitigation and evacuation being ready to go. And so we're going to talk a little bit about fire risk here. I know we got a little bit on the state. So where is our highest fire risk in the Rolling Fork Valley? Now, this is a map. I'm sorry. This is a map of that Pittman County did, because we're in 3 counties, right? We're in Clarkville, Pittman, and Gunnison County, fire districts. So I get to deal with 3 sets of this. God's fun. On Pittman County's map, and every county does this, we have, each county has what's called a community wildfire protection plan, right? TWPP. And you gauge where your, you gauge where your greatest risk is. And it's funny, in all of Pittman County, the red and the dark colors are the highest danger. And in all of Pittman County, and this isn't even in Pickett County, but it showed up on their map. This surrounding Carverdale is the highest wildfire danger in the valley surrounding Carverdale. And it's great because of the elevation and just the geography of the place. There's a lot of pinyon and juniper, sage, that kind of stuff, a lot of west and south facing slopes, those kinds of things. So mitigation and preparation where we live is vital. Number one, to saving your life. Number two, to possibly saving their structure. Because what we know is that when a fire starts and it's really going, and you probably saw it on the news, you've seen it all year since January in California. When a fire starts going like that, it's impossible to get enough people and enough engines and enough aircraft that squirt enough water to put it out. When it's going, it's gonna do whatever it wants. It's too late. Right? So the mitigation is key. So what do we do? And I'm not trying to scare everybody, but you just got, I just want you to know what's real, right? And what's happening, because there's a lot we can do. So to have a fire adapting community, and it dovetails quite clearly into drought resilience, right? To have fire adaptive communities, you need forest management. We have a lot of public lands, BLM and Forest Service, rapid detection and response. And the local counties, we've been a part of it, private donors, Holy Cross Electric, Excel, have all been spending millions in the last 5 years, 4 years, really putting up what's called Pano AI cameras. Pano, P-A-N-O, is a company. And they sell these wildfire cameras. We've got them on Sunlight, Crown Mountain. We did one on Elephant Mountain. Have quite a few up on Lookout, all over the place, all the way up to Aspen. What they do is it is AI stuff, and it 24/7 looks and it says, "Ooh, that's a puff of smoke. That's a fire." And what it does is it sends an alert to the panel people. And they ground truth it with a human, which is really good, right? They look at it and they go, "Yeah, no, it's a cloud," or whatever. And they ground truth it. And they have people on 24/7. And if it turns out, yep, it's a smoke, they notify us right away. And and that's before anyone calls 911 probably and all that. So we start being able to locate it, determine ownership. Is this something, is it real? Is it something we need to go work on? Right, so that's great. It works very well.
Ron, I'm gonna invite you to just be on this side of the screen, so we're closer to the recording, so we can hear you.
Okay.
Well.
All right, and then partnerships. Gwen talked about the Roy Ford Valley Wildfire Collaborative. That was formed about 3 years ago. And a woman named Angie Dablin is the executive director. Frog in my throat. And Angie's great. To date, they have raised almost $4 million for grants and mitigation efforts and stuff like that. And we, just us, the collaborative goes all over the valley, all over the Crystal Valley. It involves about 40 or 50 different groups, fire districts, sheriff's office, cattlemen's association, on and on, town governments, on and on. And we identify landscape size mitigation projects that we can do. And then how do we figure out how to fund them? And these things have been impossible for decades because for years, the U.S. Forest Service, federal government, won't work with counties and will not work with us with federal money. Really hard, it's just the rules. And three years ago, the Pickton County Emergency Manager and me and Kevin Warner from the Forest Service, who's my neighbor and a great guy, and Angie, we started working together. How can we do cross-pollinated projects that are important They don't have to be landscape size to start, but how do we do that? And can we get to the point where, a little fire district can sign a contract with the federal government, with a county as well, and we can all figure out who pays what, who does what, and just get this done. Kevin Warner led that, on the Fed side, and now it's kind of common practice. That he was unbelievable. We worked for 18 months on it, and we got it done. So in the last couple of years, we've been doing quite a few projects. We did one this side of Swiss Village, right? To break up the fuel heading up valley. We did a big one on the north end of the Redstone Campground to try to protect the campground, Aloha Meadows. We did a big one. We just got done doing one on the roads in the Serpentine subdivision in Marble, and we're doing a joint one with the Forest Service above that to do a fuel break going into Marble, and on and on. There's Sunnyside in Aspen, there's West Soapers Creek in the Salt Fire District. They're happening all over. Angie got a grant for $1 million to do mitigation around Glenwood Springs. And so it's just building and building, and actually, we're having a meeting, a dinner with a group of donors on Wednesday to see about doing a bunch more stuff in the Crystal Valley and Carbondale area. That's how I feel about mitigation. I believe it in wildfire, it is the single most important thing we can do. Because you can't get enough engines and people out. I got 6 people on duty, right? And that's not to say we can't gather people fast, but you can't get enough around them. If you mitigate properly, a fire can be just rolling through a bunch of trees, right? With all the canopies touching, and it runs up into that area that's mitigated. And it's not a clear cut, it's a mosaic, but it just breaks up the crown of the trees. That fire will stop, drop onto the ground and stump around, and we can get our hands on it. Or we can get people out. That's what mitigation does on a kind of little bigger scale, subdivision type scale. Really important, and we have the pedal to the metal on that. And that's why I'm here. And Gwen had asked me to come, and all of these partnerships like this are just vital, that we keep forming them, keep working together. Ember proofing homes. This is where I'm gonna land. Ember proofing your home. You can do fire mitigation at your place pretty easily. I've got some handouts and stuff, happy to give you. We have it on our website and Facebook page. There are a lot of things you can do to harden your home without spending a ton of money doing stuff. If you have a bunch of trees and growth around it, sure, you're gonna need to do some mitigation, but it's not clear cutting again. There's a real process, 5 feet out, 20 feet out, 30 feet out. Very, very simple. As firefighters can do it, it has to be simple. We can do it. So we have that information. We are simple creatures. All right. So we have an immediate zone, intermediate zone, and an extended zone. And that's just the basics of it. Go ahead.
And I just want people to know that
Yep.
the fire department is available to people to help do
Yep.
this with homes.
We will,
So you can sign up and somebody will get in touch with you and.
if you want a wildfire consultation on your property, we do them for free. And we have a program that will come, take photos and, walk around it with you and produce a report for you. And it's yours. We don't send it anywhere. It's yours. And you can look at it and go, hey, I'll do that. I can't do that. Or how do we do that? But with the Wildfire Collaborative, we can help you with funding your own project at your house, because they have 50-50 match grants and other things. And again, Angie is an incredible fundraiser, and we're looking to bolster that mitigation pool of money so that we can do more and more. This year, we've had 110 requests for home wildfire mitigation consults. Wow. Our guy's busy. So, don't hesitate. And then again, hazardous fuel reduction, these are all identified in our, county wildfire protection plan. And this just kind of shows you where we've identified places in the area. Elk Springs is a big one, Pinyon Mesa, and they've done really great work becoming firewise communities, for the whole subdivision. And it takes a couple of years, but it can be done. And so on and on. And, we are really working with CMC in Spring Valley to protect that. County Road 114, emergency evac corridors, things like that. And this is really, it's 2 years old, right? The collaborative is about 3 years old. This whole thing is only about 2 years old, and we're finally hitting fourth gear, and we're gonna keep going. Right? And then finally, evacuation, really important. Even if you've done mitigation and wildfire is blowing through, you still gotta get, you gotta go. And, ReachWell is a great app. You can look it up on the App Store or Google Play. And ReachWell is really cool. It does emergency notifications for you, whatever counties or towns or whatever you want to be notified from, it'll do it. It collects zero personal information. And you can turn the alerts on and off as you wish. And the Carbondale Fire District is the first fire district to have their own ReachWell channel. So now you can have us on it when we send alerts. We're also the first, and I still think only, to have a full Spanish language website next to our regular website. We just think it's that important. And we were the first. I still think we're the only, and I'm going to brag about that. All right, ReachWell, very good. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So-
that was a rapid fire.
I have a question, Don.
Yes.
Are there any people in the real estate business who come to these meetings regarding the wildfire potential of areas they're selling properties?
Yes. They have. This is a really good question. It's something I forgot to talk about. Because this is gonna affect realtors and all of us. For the last 16 months, there's been a committee in the state of Colorado going over what's called the WUI code, Wildland Urban Interface, right? And anywhere here, we are in the Wildland Urban Interface, right? We interface with wildlands wherever we are. The town of Carbondale, many portions of it are in the WUI. That affects realtors. What they're about done with, and the governor's gonna sign it, probably in the next couple of months, before the end of the year, is a whole new wildland urban interface building code. And it's gonna go out, and it's gonna be the law of the land. There's a lot of fighting and, how can you do that stuff, but it's gonna happen. And, it's gonna affect, real estate purchases, it's gonna affect remodels over 500 square feet, on and on, and
Home
all.
insurance, yeah.
And all new construction. In the end, it's the right thing to do. I don't know about the way it's done, but in the end, it's the right thing to do, to have a good WUI code where contractors and developers and people are forced to do it right, right? Because for years, subdivisions and developments just plant trees everywhere, and the design review committees say you gotta have this many trees, and it's all great. But then you look at it, as a mature subdivision, and you think, wow, there's too many trees there. And River Valley Ranch is doing a great job. They are working on that. And to their credit, their design review committee is still working on revamping it and making it much more mitigation friendly and changing it. And we're also going to be working with the collaborative and RVR to do mitigation projects on the outskirts, right? To keep a fire that comes roaring in from just blowing through. And they've done great work, and I want to say that. So yes.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans, or did you already educate landscapers?
That's been a big question. There's we have educated landscapers, but there's no program to educate landscapers. The state WUI code is gonna be that. You gotta follow the code, right? Cause the wildland urban interface code isn't just building materials. It's vegetation and immediate, intermediate and extended zones, and you gotta put your vegetation in, according to those. And that is finally really just gonna happen.
Rob,
It's always been a weak link.
so within the town of Carbondale, like just to think within the town limit, is that all wildlife, or is that all WUI, subject to WUI, or are there only portions on the outskirts that would be subject?
And I think all of Carbondale will be subject to the WUI code. The weird thing is what, and you've all seen it I've been fighting fires since '87. I was on the Storm King fire when 14 died, and I ran a big part of the Coal Seam fire, on and on, right? So I've been part of most of the large wildfires here. We lost my train of thought. What we've seen happen, and it started in 2012. I don't know if you remember the Waldo Canyon fire in Colorado Springs, but it burned 500 plus homes, and it was a wildfire up in the hill, came down the hill, and a subdivision that looks eerily like River Valley Ranch, and it burned 500 homes, and it was burning wooden fences that cuts the houses, it was trees, it was everything, and that was a wake-up call in Colorado, because and we've seen those now, the Marshall Fire that happened a few years ago, that burned 1,000 homes east of Denver. What happens, a WUI fire comes in and it hits a place like RVR, Crystal Village, and the wind is just wrong, and all that happens, and you start lighting buildings on fire. It's no longer a wildfire, it is a suburban conflagration, where the houses are the fuel, trees were the fuel, the houses are now the fuel. That's catastrophic. And that is what the WUI code is trying to avoid, or to mitigate. And I think the WUI code will have parts that are more strict in the places that really touch the interface, but you could, on the wrong day, you could burn all of Carbondale down. You could burn 90% of it down. We just did a scenario this spring with the town, walking through that, a tabletop scenario, coming off of Fulgate Mason. It could happen with the wrong wind at the wrong time. So mitigation for everyone is important, and ember-proof it, right? Ember-proof it. If you can, ember-proof your home, screens on your fence, no wood piled up next to your house, all that. You can have every house around you burn and your house will be okay. If you do the hardening things, even if you're not right up next against the woods. It's very effective and not a giant task.
Really appreciate it.
Awesome, thanks.
So, where more work is needed, is in my research of other towns, I came across, a town staff positions that had been added in Jackson, Wyoming. They now have a dedicated ecosystem stewardship administrator. So she's largely working regionally. And it's to really try to head off loss of biodiversity and land degradation. So I'm starting to see more of that kind of awareness, that we can do all of the conservation, but what we've got to do is really look at how we're treating the ecosystem and how we're creating resiliency there and health. And that's sort of, like I said, really the next frontier of collaboration. It's not something that a small town like Carbondale can or should have a position for. It should be a regional collaborative effort and funded collaboratively. Regionally. We're, as I think Eric was talking a little bit more, there's not a specific trigger right now, like a depth of the river flow that will trigger water restriction or a specific communication plan. And I think we would benefit from just having a little bit more conversation about what that would look like, you know, what happens when the crystal gets to what level? And what do we need to ask from townspeople? What are we gonna do in different parks? But a real plan that is considering these very real and imminent scenarios. There are gaps in public education and coordination between different sectors. These were a lot of the recommendations that were made in the original report to do outreach to agriculture, convene meetings of the water users on the Crystal, folks that are involved in tourism, the groups that are working on ecosystem health, and get more clear about the messaging that's really needed right now and the ecosystem efforts that are needed. And as Rob was mentioning, the wildfire mitigation staffing and equipment still remains underfunded, given the risks that we face. There's a lot of great work that's been done, but there's a lot more public education that needs to happen so that people can start using the resources that exist and create more safety in our towns. So next steps would be looking at funding mechanisms for ongoing collaboration and implementation of adaptive climate action focused on community and ecosystem health. These are, again, outside of that decarbonization focus that most climate action is right now. And to review and refine the recommendations annually, this is under the environmental board's purview at this time. So that's what I've got for you. Happy to have any discussion or questions.